So, welcome everyone to our webinar with Kash Battacharya, a friend of mine and a travel blogger. I'm not going to put influencer next to them. Maybe we'll talk about that. He's already shaking his head. But Kash is a fantastic man. We've just been catching up just before we've gone live on this, and I'm excited to talk about a few things that he's been doing because of lockdown. Kash, you're also known as the Budget Traveller. That's your handle on all social medias. And you also are the Nat Geo Travel Blogger of the Year in 2016. And you have created this business around your passion and love of travel. And no better way to talk about empathy than in kind of the context of travel and meeting other people in different cultures. So I want to welcome you on, and yeah, thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, no, it's great to be part of such a wonderful initiative. For me, travel is, they say, the best education in life. It teaches you so many things. Travel has been the door to learning more about the world we live in, about myself as a person, and I've always found that travel is kind of a reflection of yourself. So when you talk to people and learn about people, you learn more about yourself. And so in many ways, I think it's the best thing out there. And especially in the absence of travel at the moment, you really you miss so many things in your life. And yeah, for me, travel is not just a holiday. It's a route to all the best things in life. So
yeah, and as you said, suffering from the fact that we can't travel at the moment.
No.
How did you get into this career? The idea is that Empathy Week, this is part of the Empathy Week webinar series. Empathy Week was last week, where schools all over the world took part in watching films and videos, and hopefully they're now moving on to empathetic action projects. But also empathy is about understanding people, and for you, that's a huge part of traveling. But how did you get into that thing? Basically, there'll be students that are watching or will watch this back, and they'll be like, I want to go and travel the world. I want to see the world. And I potentially might want to turn it into a business as well. How did you start your journey?
As my journey starts, I guess, mainly because of my identity and where I grew up, and also because of my parents. My dad was a doctor in England. We were an Asian family growing up in England. I went to school in Manchester, in Oldham, and my father would work freelance in hospitals, from hospital to hospital, without a fixed contract. So he had a pretty difficult life, but we were often changing cities, moving from place to place in England every 1 or 2 years. And in one period of my life, when I was 4 or 5 years old, my parents tried to move back to India for 3 months unsuccessfully. So I was taken out of my comfortable existence in England and dropped into a very small rural place in Bihar in India at the age of 4. So traveling has been part of my life since I was young. It's a confusing and terrifying thing when you're 4 years old, jumping on 4 planes to a place like India, which you've read in books and seen in films and Bollywood films, and then you've confronted with the reality of what India is like. And if you've been to India, as you've been to India, it is an incredibly beautiful but terrifying place, because it's so full of humanity. It's uncomparable to anything of the life we have in England, for example. So travel has always been about, for me, at the root of it, it's about my identity and trying to find my sense of self and where I belong in the world. And that has always fascinated me. And that's how I got into starting the blog, because I always wanted to be a writer since I was a kid. I was always getting scraps of paper, creating booklets with friends, and writing stories. And the love of travel and the love of writing. I started the blog as a joke when I just lost my job in publishing firm I loved in Edinburgh in 2009, and I started the blog as a kind of a therapy, writing travel stories because I couldn't afford to go traveling that summer. I was broke. I was 30,000, 40,000 pounds in debt for my first business that I used to run, which was a magazine. So yeah, for me, the travel blog was the start of writing about stories, about um, just about. It was kind of a therapy for me. It was something I would do. I used to work 3 jobs at the time, working in a bar, working in a bookshop, doing advertising sales, which I hated. And the blog was just purely about writing about travel and escaping. And I still feel that to this day that I never, in 2009, nobody would make a penny from blogging. Nowadays, everybody's earning millions of pounds and traveling the world. But in those days, in 2009, it was just a very small thing, blogging. So for me, it was my passion about writing and traveling. And that's how the blog started, as simply a joke one very boring Saturday afternoon, I think, in April 2009. And here we are now.
So it's interesting for me to hear this because I didn't know you had your business that you were in debt from, and I think maybe it's a really great time to be talking about these sort of things and being open, because a lot of people will be suffering with businesses and with mental health, and students who have exams but then don't have exams and are questioning probably their life and what they want to do with their life even more. And it's really refreshing to hear from the successes you're having or have had over the past few years with travel writing, that actually it stemmed from what we could probably say was a failure. Do you look back on that now and think, was that a chance encounter that you picked up a pen and started writing, or was it you said it was kind of always within you, but you never planned for this to come from what you started?
I never planned for it to. I never planned to become a guy who runs a blog and then travels around the world. I never dreamt that would be even possible. If somebody told me that in 2009 and said, "Oh, you're going to be the guy who's going to travel around the world and you're going to be National Geographic Travelers Blog of the Year and you're going to publish a book in 4 languages," I would have laughed at that person. I would have cried in tears of happiness, because for me, university was the best years of my life. It gave me 4 years, gives you enough time in Scotland, it's 4 years. Not like in England where it's 3 years, so they make you work a little hard in Scotland. But it gives you enough time to figure out what you want to do with your life. And I studied economics. But by the end of it, I wanted to publish a magazine. And that was just an adventure that I was having with 2 other friends. And it turned out not so great in the end, because it landed me in a lot of debt. And I ended up doing a lot of jobs that I really hated. But the funny thing about life is that there's no real design in your, when you think of it, you don't know where it's leading to. But when you look back, you realize that everything has a purpose in life. That as much as it's horrible to think about being in debt and failing, but failure taught me a lot about success. It made me a more stronger person, made me more resilient. And all those years of traveling around, having a pretty simple childhood in England, and then going to India, and then moving to India at the age of 12 ultimately, which was really tough for me. All those things made me a better person. I made a more rounded person today, a more empathetic person. And I think that's prepared me for everything. All my successes today is all because of that. So, yeah. Don't know if that answers. I'm maybe going off on a tangent here, but
no, it's great. Keep going off on that tangent. Do you remember the first place you went to on your own? Like the first place that you traveled to on your own, and what were your emotions?
First place I went to was on my own, was a place called Bremen It's a town in the north of Germany. And I was married at the time, but my marriage wasn't going too well. And I was in a lot of debt still at that time. And I just started the blog, and I was like, I need to write about something in the blog, something new. So at that time, Ryanair, for those who are old enough, or maybe their parents could tell them, that there used to be these amazing 1 pence, 2 pence return flights that you could get to some of the most obscure cities in Europe, places that normal people would not go to, like Bremen, well, which is a lovely city by all means. And I caught a flight for €2, 2 pence return, stayed in a hostel, which was about €11, and the whole trip cost €50 for a weekend. And I loved it. It was just such a release. Traveling by yourself can be very scary because you are forced to confront your own self, and you get yourself out of the comfort zone. You go to a hostel, you're so scared and nervous about talking to people in the common room, grab a beer, and finally you get a bit of courage and sit down at the table. By the end of the night, you're friends with 10 different people from 10 parts of the world. And you come back from the trip feeling $1 million about yourself, about the world around you, and you feel that you can conquer life. Travel is like this magical elixir, and that's where hostels for me were amazing, because I was not the world's most adventurous, confident traveler, but you learn about life and everything in a hostel. So
Amazing. I'm aware that some people might not know or have come across a hostel being younger. How would you describe a hostel? Because it's not a hotel. A hostel is very different to a hotel.
yeah, a hostel is, it's not like that movie The Hostel you've heard of. If you had the bad luck of watching that movie, please don't watch it. A hostel is it's kind of like a United Nations of the world in one room. You meet the world in one room. It's the most exciting place you can be. For me, my university years was like being in a hostel. When I stayed in my university accommodation, that was like being in a hostel. There's this movie called, in English, it's called The Spanish Hostel. It's called La Auberge Espagnole, and it's that concept of when you go into university, you meet the whole world, and the place you stay is like a hostel where you meet people from all over the world. And I missed that feeling of meeting people and exchanging cultures, which I had at university. And I think after my university years, I was lost and I couldn't make friends easily. Everything was so difficult. But when I first stayed at a hostel up to 5 years after graduating, it was like that feeling of going to university and meeting people and cultures, and that feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself. That's what being in a hostel is like. It's like you learn so many interesting things from conversations. You learn maybe how to play I don't know, stereotypical La Bamba. Maybe you pick up the chords for La Bamba, and maybe you learn some of the worst swear words in German, Italian, and French. You learn how to cook paella in the kitchen. It's just amazing what you can learn in a hostel. So it's hard to describe in a word, but I hope that gives a feeling to people listening.
Yeah, amazing. And the fact that you could be sleeping in a room in bunk beds with different people, and they have nights and entertainment and all sorts of things on. I think that's
Yes, so
something that's incredible about hostels.
a lot of people have hostels when they think, oh, are you telling me it's like 16 bunk beds in a room and people snoring? Some people get scared when you mention the word hostel. But hostels have grown up a lot nowadays. You get hostels with private rooms. You get hostels with privacy curtains where you can have your own space. So if you're scared about not having your own space, you can have your own space in hostels, but there are also places where you can meet people. Like there's always a common room, there's a kitchen. Some of these hostels have a rooftop terrace. Some of them have a swimming pool. There's one in Florence and was one in here in Berlin. By the way, greetings from Berlin. This is where I'm based. And in Berlin, there's one with a swimming pool and a sauna, and you spend only 14 euros a night in this hostel. So.
It's incredible. And if there's someone to talk about hostels, it's you, because in 2018 you published your book, The Grand Hostels, and that features hostels in how many countries?
Over 80 countries.
Wow. This is an unfair question to ask, I think, but what is your favorite country and why?
Oh, favorite country. I would say Portugal. I love Portugal. Portugal is the people, the food. Food is really important. For me, food is the gateway to everything amazing in life, to conversations, to culture, to learning. Everything starts with a great plate of food, and everything ends with a bad plate of food. every holiday memory is destroyed with a bad plate of food. So food is everything. So Portugal, the culture, the food, the people are very friendly. If you talk about empathy, I think Portuguese people are some of the most nicest, most empathetic people. They naturally have a flair for hospitality, and they welcome you and make you feel at home, as if you're staying at somebody's house. That's how the feeling you get every time you meet or stay in a hostel, a hotel, or even a pension or an apartment. People always are so friendly, and yeah, it's a rich culture. It's a fascinating place, and they have some of the most amazing hostels in the world too.
Amazing. And on the topic of empathy, let's delve in a bit more into that, because traveling, I mean, I can't say I've traveled loads, but I've traveled a bit, and I resonate with all the things that you've been saying about the nervousness around traveling on your own, or going to a hostel and turning up and you don't know anyone, and then you realize actually how much time you spend not just on your own physically, but on your own, in your own head and thoughts. And it's a huge experience, and I encourage anyone to do it if you get the chance to when you're older. But for you, how has your empathy developed from kind of, I suppose, being in Scotland and being at university and going for a failed business to then writing travel stories? And then on that travel journey, did you have any preconceptions about other parts of the world? And they don't have to be negative or positive, but just how has your idea of empathy developed over time with the more and more countries that you visited?
I think the one thing that travel does is that it gives you, the more you meet people, the more you understand the world around you, the more less you're scared. Because I think one of the things I always say when people say, why are hostels important? Why is travel important nowadays? Because travel is nowadays a difficult topic because of COVID. Travel is not possible. And in many ways, travel has become a bit of a bad thing. And like, oh, you're and it's important to remember in these times that travel is what teaches you about the world. And I notice that a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about culture, especially when you see with the rise in right-wing politics and how things, people have misgivings about cultures and wrong things. We won't go that, but I just find that every time you travel, you learn something. Like I went to, for example, South Africa, and people would be like, "Oh, you're going to South Africa? Where are you going to?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to Joburg." "Oh, wow, that's one of the world's most dangerous cities." And yeah, surely enough, you type into a thing called Google, which is what we do whenever we're in doubt about anything. You Google it, you say, "Oh, Johannesburg was one of the world's most dangerous cities." And I was really, really scared when I went to Joburg. And I landed there thinking I had landed on Pluto or some alien planet. I was looking out of the window of my taxi thinking somebody's going to kill me or ravage me. And I was the complete opposite experience. Yes, are very dangerous parts in Job that you should be careful about. that doesn't make Joburg a dangerous place to visit. As long as you know where to go and what to do, and you're obviously in the company of a local, you're in perfectly good hands. And I had an amazing time in Joburg, and I went to Cape Town also, and I went on a road trip around the Garda route. And South African people are the nicest, most friendliest people you will ever meet on your travels. I mentioned Portugal there, but I would put Japan and South Africa side by side. It's a difficult toss up between the two, but lovely people, and yeah, and that was one of the greatest adventures of my life, going to South Africa.
Yeah, South Africa's amazing. I've been lucky enough to go there as well. But and similarly to you, I landed into Joburg, and it was yeah. Go straight from the airport straight into a cab and have it booked, and don't look at anyone. And it, you get there and you're like, oh my god. And I was young at the time. I was 17. And I remember being like, oh my
wow.
god, we're gonna get shot. And then you get there and everyone's just so friendly, and you're like, what was all that noise about? But I think that's our brain, right? We think about the negatives because, well, we're wired like that. Scientifically, our brains are wired to put danger above comfort, because if our brains aren't switched on, especially in the new environment, how do we survive? But what people don't realize is that we don't live in prehistoric, times, or we don't live where there's wild animals. And that's another thing I thought about South Africa. I was like, there's going to be lions everywhere, there's going to be leopards.
Exactly. Like when I went to Australia, I was terrified I was walking the street and there'd be snakes coming at me from every direction. But I luckily did not meet one snake while in Western Australia, even though I was in one place where I was told that it was the viper mating season, and there would be baby vipers all over this area near this lighthouse I was visiting. And I was like, oh my God, there's vipers everywhere. But in the end, no, there was nothing there. So yeah, there's lots of preconceptions, and I think media also generally sometimes doesn't do a very good job painting the right picture. So the best thing about travel is that you get to see it with your own eyes, and you get to, you have to see the world with your own eyes. You can't go depending on what other people tell you. The best thing about travel is that it's accessible, it's open, and if you stay in the right places, you do the right things. This is why I always say stay in hostel. I remember going to Argentina to Buenos Aires and ending up in this really nice boutique hotel, which was right on the edge of La Boca, which is one of the more tougher parts of Buenos Aires. And I regretted it because I felt lonely. I didn't meet enough people. I got into the wrong place at the wrong time, but I was fine. And if I'd stayed hostel in the more central part of town, I would have probably would have got the right information, and I would have had a better trip and experience of Buenos Aires. But yeah, that's the thing. You travel, you're always learning all the time. So.
Yeah, exactly. And you've already alluded to this as a way to, I suppose, build rapport or build empathy with other people in food. And you said, a great meal is an awesome way to meet people and make friends, but a terrible meal is also a way to maybe get out of there. But what are some what are some other ways that you have managed to develop your empathy beyond food whilst traveling? What are the other ways that you managed to do that?
Well, as you know very well, Ed, my job involves running the travel blog. I travel 6 months of the year on the road before COVID. And the one way I make a living is through shooting videos and stories of places and people. And if anybody doesn't know about the profession of doing videos, it's incredibly stressful. You always don't have enough time to shoot, and it's a very technical thing. It's all about getting the right light at the right time. You're often on a very tight schedule. and you're juggling multiple things at one point. And it's basically me and my other half, Sabrina, who's my girlfriend, who is from Germany, and she shoots all the videos for my blog, The Budget Traveler. And it's incredibly stressful, but this is where if you're not an empathetic person, if you're basically an arsehole, then you will not go far in this, in my job of blogging or storytelling or working in video. Traveling and working in travel requires a lot of empathy and understanding of cultures and sensitivities. You have to be respectful when you're filming people. It's all about gaining their confidence and trust. And through my work as a storyteller, as doing videos, writing about places, photography, you're being allowed in somebody's private space. And South Africa trip was a great example where we were shooting the video about doing a road trip along the garden route. And we were given access to a lot of hostels and their families and their communities. We went to this place, this Rastafarian community in, it's a famous for being one of the kind of, not skydiving, one of the paragliding capitals of the world. I can't remember the name of the place. It's right in the middle of the garden route. And we were allowed in the community, and we were allowed to film there. Initially, they were very suspectful, but we sat down, had a beer. And after one beer or two beers, they were hugging us and they were telling their life stories. And a plate of food, a beer, preferably cold, even warm, anything, a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, and your friends. And that's often what our job requires to do, is to listen, learn, talk. And it's amazing what you can achieve with a bit of patience and understanding.
It's interesting. We had Minter Dial on the show this morning, and he was saying, the two things that stop people from being empathetic are stress and time. And, I think having a nice meal or a nice drink, sitting down, listening, relieves stress, and you're making time. And it's interesting to see that parallel there. Is there a moment in time that sticks out when you've been traveling where you've been completely misunderstood? So people haven't exercised empathy with you. And then what did that teach you about empathy, but from the other perspective? So, because I think we often latch onto that way more when we're not being understood ourselves. It's almost like a standout memory.
When I was, it's tough. I think my Argentina trip was one of my toughest trips because I was traveling solo and I wasn't staying in a hostel and I didn't speak the language. And Buenos Aires was tough because I had so many high expectations about Buenos Aires. I was so excited about it, but that's where travel is a great leveler in life, is because travel is basically an extension of life. It's not something, you don't gain superpowers and the world doesn't become a different place when you jump on a plane. It's still basically the world. Even if you go into another part of the world, it's still the world around you. And you go in and then you realize that, okay, this is a bit more tougher. Getting from A to B is tougher. Trying to communicate with people was really hard. And then people would look at you in a strange way if you asked for things. And at some point, you almost feel close to breaking down. You feel so helpless and so lonely and so difficult. And something we talked about before, that sometimes in the world of travel and influences, for example, you see this picture perfect image of the world, but travel is not, is sometimes it's a beautiful thing, but it's a very hard, brutal place to be, because when you're traveling on your own, traveling long journeys on a plane, and there's no one else but yourself to depend on, you really have to back yourself up and really have to have faith in yourself, and you have to have more patience with yourself and more empathy with yourself, which is something I don't think we don't do enough often, is that sometimes we are our own harshest critics, and we're so hard on ourselves. From the day we're born, we have this struggle for survival through university, through life, through everything. Even every day I face that still, that I need to be kind to myself and understand myself better. So through that whole experience, it was really, really hard. And there came a time when I was in El Chalten, which is this popular hiking spot in Patagonia, where I met two people who didn't speak a word of English, but wanted to go hiking with me. And they said, "We'll take you hiking." And it was a mother and the daughter. And that almost had me in tears. I was just like so emotional. I met this randomly on the bus, and they said, "Look, we'll take care of you." And we hardly spoke a word of English. And the whole day we hiked for about 30 kilometers. And I'm a wimp when it comes to hiking. I'm like terrible. I was grumbling and complaining the whole time. And she was like, no problem. Come. Kash, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be worth it in the end. And in the end, you see this La Laguna, this epic picture of this, I think I can't even, my brain's gone. It's this epic glacier and this rock formation that's iconic. And you reach this glacial lake. And I was just like, wow, this was worth it. And then I hugged her. I was like, thank you for bringing me here. But that was after 2 weeks of absolute, very difficult 2 weeks of travel. So
yeah, huge lows, huge highs with travel. That's
yeah.
You've reminded me and my friends, got a group of friends that call that what you've just said type 2 fun. So there's two types of fun. There's type 1, which is playing a video game or watching TV or Netflix, whatever. And there's type 2, which is you absolutely hate it, doing something really difficult, but then afterwards, like the top of the mountain or whatever it is just amazing, and it's all worth that pain. And I think travel is people see it as type 1 fun, but it's type 2 because you're getting your bag and you've got to unpack your bag and you go to another place. And I think this brings us really nicely on to talking about, Instagram, influencers. I'm not going to say too much. What's your view on how society views travel and the influencer culture that we have around the world?
I think if anybody's clued into the world of travel influencer culture, I don't need to tell them much, but all I would say is that there's always two sides to a story. What you see is sometimes not the reality. I think the one thing that influencer culture has taught us about travel in general is that we live in a very misunderstood world and difficult times at the moment. So it's very important to have empathy and understanding, and that there are many people who are generally trying to make a living and generally try to tell stories and try to give sense of place and purpose when they travel, when they tell stories on their Instagram channel. So those people should be celebrated and supported. And the people who really genuinely are more concerned about their own happiness and their own celebrating their own lifestyle without having much connection to the person on the other side of the phone, which is where I feel very often angry, is when people in times of trouble, and now especially when people can't travel, people are yearning or missing travel, people don't have the opportunity to travel, they may be not in a good place. I don't think it creates a very healthy atmosphere when you're showing off and saying, I'm here, look at me, I'm having the time of my life, I don't give a rat's arse about COVID, I'm partying with my mates, and I don't know, I would feel very uncomfortable with that personally, but that's me, because I'm maybe more, whenever I put something out on Instagram, whenever I write something, I'm always thinking about the person on the other side of who's looking in. What message am I giving? What am I sharing here? Because ultimately, travel should be about empowerment. It shouldn't be about disempowering people. And I feel this kind of influencer culture where people are showing off places that nobody can go to, or it's impossible for them to reach, or showing them a dream and painting this reality, it's just not nice. It's just actually not kind. And ultimately, travel should be about connection, about inspiring people, about empowering people. And that's the kind of travel that I want to talk about on my Instagram channel. And I think the right travel writers, storytellers, the people we know, they do that. So
Oh
I don't
yeah,
know if that
definitely.
answers the question.
No, it definitely does. The key bit I pulled out from that was connection. Yeah, you can travel to the most luxurious hotel with 5-star treatment and have an infinity pool in your back garden, but if you're not connecting with anyone, are you gaining anything? Probably not. Maybe you're gaining relaxation. I don't know, but
Everybody has different reasons to travel, and I also don't believe in everybody has their own motives. And I think we should be kind, and before we think and say something, we should reflect a little before we say something, because I feel social media is a very toxic place sometimes for people nowadays. So my also advice is that don't spend too much time looking at your phone, even though you're stuck inside your bedrooms. There is a big world out there of real people and real conversations. So don't paint the world based on what you see on the phone. Go out and travel.
amazing. And I want to bring back onto, especially as students this week and now the weeks going forward from Empathy Week are carrying out their own empathy action projects and thinking about how can they use or how can they understand the problem in their community or in the world and go out and actually do something. So rather than just seeing a problem and go, I've got a solution, actually pull those two apart, and empathy is in the middle of that, understand who's been affected. You have done a perfect empathy action project, Kash. If you were if you were taking part as a student, you might have been shortlisted for the awards. But I want you to talk about what you've done. So you were identified because of COVID. We can't escape talking about it, I don't think, especially with your industry and the travel industry. Devastating to lots of personal friends and connections and business people that that have hostels across the world. Talk me through, what you did and how you've managed to achieve this sense of community and support for your industry.
My first tip to all the students would be whatever project you're creating. I say this to anybody who's starting a blog, even if they want to start their own business. The most important thing you have to think about is how can you create value in people's lives. Once you start thinking about creating value and how you can add value in their lives, then you can start creating something really exciting and interesting. So my main issue back in March last year, it's a year ago, I was basically twiddling my thumbs in lockdown in Germany and reading stories of all my friends in the hosteling industry who were struggling to keep their hostels going. And two friends of mine, one is called Tinja, that she runs a hostel in Finnish Lapland. It's called Seven Fells Hostel. Once travel is open again, if you're looking for a real adventure, Northern Lights from the hostel dorm, or you want to see the midnight sun, which is 24 hours daylight in Finland, go to this hostel. So Tinja from Seven Fells and Steve and Linda that run a hostel called the Beehive in Rome, they put out a simple thing saying, we're struggling guys at the moment, but we really need your support. Can you buy a voucher from us? And here's the email address. So me and a couple of friends in the hosteling industry were talking about this. Charlotte and Rosie from Stay the Night, and their London-based agency, and Lior, who runs a company called Hostel Consulting. So we said, what can we do to make this easier? Because email, why don't we create a voucher platform where people can buy vouchers for the hostels they love, and it's valid for 2 years. And we create one platform for all the hostels in the world. So we called it Adopt a Hostel, where we encourage people to adopt a hostel. And we created this voucher platform in over 4 weeks' time. It's a very simple website. If you look onto it, adoptahostel.com. And the centerpiece of the message was this video that we created, which was created by my other half, Sabrina. And if you look at the video, it was basically testimonials and stories of each 3 hostels involved in the project, including Steve and Linda from Rome. And that was the centerpiece of the campaign. So we pulled this video together, and you can do this from your living room. If you've got a powerful message to tell, just get people to film straight onto their mobile phones and send the videos through to you and create the story. And that was how we got the message out. And we did that for 3 months, and we managed to raise, by the end of the summer, 100,000 euros. And we managed to get mentions in over 20 to 30 international publications, from Lonely Planet, National Geographic, Traveler. So we got a lot of great coverage. And yeah, it was just a simple idea, but an important message. And yeah.
Amazing. Absolutely incredible. And some, again, creating value, simple message, and just getting it out there and being passionate about it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think you have your niche in traveling and things, and to those people listening and watching, you'll have your own niche, and it's just about, I suppose there's an element of just going and doing as well. Like, you saw it and you went, yeah, we need to do this.
And that's the things that nobody told us to do it. And that's the other thing that I always keep telling myself, is that it's great. I write about a blog, I write about travels, but ultimately life has to be something bigger than yourself. Life has to mean something more than just your story. It has to be about other people's story. And if you can find a way of bringing your story and other people's story together and create a project, then you've created something truly amazing in life. And that is, I think, empathy. When empathy is put to good use, you can create magic. And that was what I felt with Adopt a Hostel. I felt it was like, I suddenly felt a million times better, because I was so unhappy with the whole COVID situation, and I was so disempowered. And by connecting with people, and through this, I connected with hostel owners from all over the world. And my world is a bigger and better place. And yeah, I'm richer in many ways. So that's important.
Yeah, amazing. And one sort of last point before we kind of draw to a close is Nat Geo. Seems, most people have heard National Geographic, know their iconic magazines, the yellow cover with the beautiful imagery. Seems like, how, for me anyway, it just seems like so far away. Yeah, you went and became National Geographic Travel Blogger of the Year.
Yeah.
How does that, because there'll be lots of young people that look to big brands and household names, and they're just like, I would love to work for them, or I'd love to be able to be featured by them, but just think it's impossible, and so never start. How do you reflect on your journey from 2009 writing a travel story to then less than 10 years later being a National Geographic travel blogger? How do you reflect on that journey, and what's your advice to the younger generation?
My advice to everyone would be what I said before: is I never dreamt there would be a day when I would be getting on stage and no other than Mr. Michael Palin, who's the guy I grew up watching and travel. If anybody's seen Around the World in 80 Days, for example, and obviously Monty Python, I was just like, but the thing in life is that don't set yourself with too many goals, and don't wrap yourself up in your dreams and ambitions too much. It's important to dream, but don't set out with always a goal in your head. I've always been kind of a gut feeling guy. I always go with where my gut goes, and you'll feel this inner voice in you every time you make a decision in life. And my main thing when I started the blog was, whatever I do, I want to make sure that it helps people travel better. And my blog is The Budget Traveler. So the most important thing for me is to teach people that you can travel without much money in life, which is an important message that unfortunately not many people are told in life. Everybody sees travel as this elusive thing, but it's a really simple thing, and it is possible to travel with little or no money, and it's possible to have an adventure. And I think that's a really important thing. And that was the message of my blog, was that you can have a great adventure, you can meet people, you can have the best time of your life. And there are many hacks and tips of how you can do that. And once I had that formula in my head, that's what I rolled with. And that's what I would tell anybody, that think about how you can create value and make people do something better. And if you can do, if they can do that without spending too much money, then you've probably found something amazing in life. So I don't know whatever that could be, but that could be a tip and a hint on the way forward.
Amazing. And one last thing before we stop, how can people become more empathetic? From what you've learned, what would your advice be to become more understanding of other people?
To become more empathetic, well, since I'm the budget traveler and I want to stay on brand, I would say whenever travel is possible, which I hopefully will be soon, my advice to anybody is dust off your backpack, even if it means getting the smallest backpack and not paying any extra money for luggage on Ryanair. Toothbrush, clean underwear, couple of clean t-shirts, and preferably a camera, because it's always nice to document your travels. Always have a nice camera. Always have room for that. And just get on a plane and go anywhere. Go on a train, go anywhere. Go and stay in a hostel. Stay in a hostel. A hostel will teach you about empathy, will teach you about the world. It will make you the happiest person. You will find love. You will find the most beautiful person you ever hope to dream maybe in your life in a hostel. Screw dating apps. They're a waste of time, guys. Go to a hostel. You'll learn about life, people, food, everything in a hostel. And if you have any doubts about which hostel to go to, just drop me a line, and I'll help you hopefully have the best weekend of your life.
Amazing. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kash, for giving us your time all the way from Germany. You heard it here at Budget Traveler. Hit up Kash, ask him some. I'm sure wherever you ask him, he's been. Go to his blog. Go and send him a message. And I want to thank him so much for talking about travel, but also in a different context, in the context of maybe empathy, and you're inspiring in the sense that you've gone and seen a problem and you've changed it and doing things for the world. And I'm definitely going to go and have a look at that hostel in Lapland. Is it? What's it called again?
Lapland. It's called the Seven Fells Hostel. It's amazing. They have this midnight sun phenomenon that will be starting very soon in summer, where it's pretty much 24 hours daylight. Wow. And there's 7 fells, 7 little places we can go hiking, and it's pure nature, pure escape. There's even a sauna on site in the hostel.
People are now just people are quickly Googling it. Amazing. And thank you to everyone that's watching this, whether you're watching it recorded or you've come live. We've got lots of other webinars to join. And thank you very much, and see you all soon.